Hi, good morning and a warm welcome. Rose Jacobs for 𝐊𝐿𝐴N TV, reporting to you live from Sydney, and you're watching the Global Markets Roundup. Let's dive into some key highlights and happenings from yesterday, starting with the US market. Global markets edged lower and the dollar fell on Tuesday after data showed US inflation rose less than expected, raising renewed questions on when the US central bank will begin tapering its asset purchases. MSCI's World Stocks benchmark fell 0.23%, and all of the major US stock indexes were down by mid-afternoon New York time. Benchmark US indices retreated yesterday after the latest economic data showed inflation grew at a slower pace in August, renewing the focus on the federal stimulus tapering talks. The S&P 500 was down 0.57%, and the Dow Jones fell 0.84%, while the Nasdaq Composite shed 0.45% and the small cap Russell 2000 was down 1.37%. The Consumer Price Index rose 0.3% in August after increasing 0.5% in July, the Labor Department said on Tuesday. It was the lowest increase in 6 months. However, the CPI rose to 5.3% annually. Last week's data also showed that the Producer Price Index was at its highest level. The traders' focus will now be on the federal two-day meeting starting on September the 21st. The central bank officials are expected to discuss their monetary policy, including stimulus tapering, at the monthly meeting. On Tuesday, all the S&P 500 segments ended in the red. Financial and industrial stocks were the top losers. Stock indices saw losses in September as the Delta variant wreaked havoc in the communities. Moving to the futures and commodities market, gold futures were up 0.6% and silver increased by 0.33%, while copper fell 1.20%. Brent oil futures increased by 0.50% and WTI crude was up 0.43%. Looking at the bond market now, the 30-year Treasury bond yields was down 2.28%, while the 10-year bonds yield fell 2.92%. US dollar futures index increased by 0.01%, and now it's time for a small break, but stay tuned as I'll be back with the Asian and Australian market updates.
Hi, I'm 𝐾𝐨, and get ready to take the crypto ride with me on 𝐊𝐿𝐴N TV. Watch the Crypto Buzz every Tuesday and join the excitement at 𝐊𝐿𝐴N TV. From Bitcoins to NFTs to Dogecoin and DeFi, we have updates about everything around these digital currencies. Understand the investing rationale and the risks involved in the space with me, 𝐾𝐨, on Crypto Buzz. Keep watching 𝐊𝐿𝐴N TV.
Welcome back, I'm Rose Jacobs and you're watching the Global Markets Roundup show. European stocks ended flat on Tuesday with miners, banks and luxury stocks leading declines as optimism over cooling US inflation growth in August proved to be short-lived. The region-wide Stocks 600 index inched 0.01% lower, with the basic resources sector index dropping 1.9% and banks sliding 1.1%. London's FTSE 100 was trading slightly in the red, down by 0.13% at 7,059, while mid-cap focused FTSE 250 index traded flat at 23,778, remaining unswayed by the jobs data. Meanwhile, the job market in the UK continues to shine, with a number of unfilled positions hitting just 1 million in the 3 months to August 2021. The unemployment rate also fell marginally to 4.6% in July 2021 as more people entered the labour market due to a rise in job opportunities, as indicated by the figures given by the Office for National Statistics. Japan's Nikkei closed at a more than 31-year high on Tuesday, led by cyclical stocks tracking overnight with Wall Street gains, while progress in domestic vaccine rollouts raise hopes for an economic reopening. The Nikkei share average ended up 0.73%, its highest since August 1990. The broader topics jumped 1.01%. Chinese shares closed lower on Tuesday, dragged by real estate and financials after the country's most indebted developer warned of a risk of a cross default. The blue chip CSI 300 index was down 1.5%, while the Shanghai Composite Index lost 1.4%. South Korean shares ended higher on Tuesday, buoyed by foreign buying after overnight gains on Wall Street, while investors awaited US August inflation data due later in the day. The benchmark Kospi closed up 20.97% points, extending the gains to a third straight day. Australia's ASX 200 closed up by 0.16%, and the weak closing of US shares overnight would also weigh on Australian shares after data revealed inflation eased in the US, triggering fresh concerns on when the Federal Reserve will start tapering its asset purchases. CIMIC Group and Costa Group Holdings are a few companies going ex-dividend on Wednesday. Oil prices ended largely unchanged as Tropical Storm Nicholas brought heavy rain and power outages in Texas, but caused less damage to US energy infrastructure than Hurricane Ida caused earlier this month. Brent crude settled up 0.1%, while WTI crude oil ended higher at US $70.46 per barrel. Energy stocks such as Woodside Petroleum and Santos may trade on a weak note on Wednesday. Gold prices rose after US inflation fell short of expectations. Spot gold prices rose 0.7%. ASX listed gold stocks such as Northern Star Resources and Newcrest Mining could also trade higher on Wednesday. Well, that's all for now. Keep watching 𝐊𝐼𝐴 TV for more market updates. I'm Rose Jacobs and you're watching 𝐊𝐼𝐴 TV.